Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the latest in the series of Zoom chats brought to you by APSAC, the American Professional Society on the Abuse of Children. As we get started today, and before we introduce you to our really exciting guests, let me just share a little bit of logistics. By now, we're all probably really advanced Zoomers, and we've learned a few lessons along the way to make things go a little bit smoothly. So let me remind you, place your screen in speaker view. That way, whoever's speaking will have the majority of your screen. Everyone will be muted by our host. If we hope you participate, we hope you want to participate, raise your hand or put a question in the chat area, and we'll make sure we bring you into the conversation. As the presentation progresses, watch the chat box, and different links and resources that are mentioned we'll have right there in the chat boxes for you. If you enjoy our Zoom chats and our newsletters and our other resources, please consider joining APSAC. Our members are our most important resource, and we really work very hard to serve you. And you can use the discount code ZoomChat10 for a 10% discount off of your membership in APSAC. We've got so many exciting things that we can share with you. We first of all have an online course featuring 29 really important lectures. We've got some wonderful upcoming events. Our colloquium is going virtual this September 22, 23, 24. Our forensic interviewing clinic is also going virtual starting the first week of October. You can find all of this information on these items at our website, apsac.org. We also offer very attractive organizational rates. So if you don't want to join by yourself, organizational rates make it possible for your organization to join and have multiple staff logins. But we're also really sensitive to the fact that COVID-19 has brought some financial challenges, both to individuals and organizations. The last thing we want is anyone who needs their resources to do their job better to feel like you need to lose them because of finances. If you do need any assistance with your dues this year, please just send an email to executive-director@apsac.org or info@apsac.org, and we are standing by to help make sure that you don't lose access, or you have a chance to gain access to everything APSAC has to offer to help you do your job. If you're already a member, we encourage you to drop us an email to apsac@apsac.org and share any news of what's going on with you and your organization, and watch and you'll see yourself in our next APSAC newsletter. And I want to just take a second and introduce our APSAC team. We've got Alana Feldman, who's working the waiting room and behind the scenes technology, and Bree Stormer, who'll be managing some of the technology and pushing out the resources for you, as we discussed them during our wonderful presentation today, which will be opened by APSAC President Stacie LeBlanc. So Stacie is the co-founder of the UP Institute and a really, really passionate advocate for children, because she's not only an attorney, but she's also got a master's in education. And after 29 years of responding to child abuse as a supervising prosecutor with a really high conviction rate of 94%, and an executive director of 2 nonprofits, she's moved upstream and is now devoting her career to consultation and training around prevention of child maltreatment. She is particularly interested in working on translating research into practice, and has published books for families and articles on the benefits of implementing no-hit zones, which really underscores our efforts in eliminating corporal punishment in the United States. Stacie is also on the National Review Board for the United States Council of Catholic Bishops. She has received numerous awards, including Outstanding Prosecutor, FBI Directors, and Champion for Children, for successfully passing 11 legislative bills. Beyond family and pets, Stacie's greatest joy is inspiring undergraduates through her highly rated ACES CAST course at Tulane University. So with all of that background and experience, that makes Stacie the perfect person to kick off this Zoom chat. So I pass it to you, Stacie, and thank you.
Thank you, Janet, and thank you for all that our unbelievable hardworking team with Bree and Alana and Hannah here and Janet here. So thank you so much for all that you do, and thank you to the Zero Abuse team and Tyler to bring CAST to us. CAST is one of the greatest joys that I've been able to do. I say I sort of do it in a semi-retirement mode, but I've been doing it now for 5 years, and I feel so blessed that Victor Vieth opened my eyes to this. It was his original dream, vision, and he's the founding father of this. And it has been one of my greatest blessings to be a part of being able to teach a CAST course at Tulane. It is my dream to bring it to other universities here and to keep that momentum going. I also want to thank and welcome many friends that are here today on the line, but also some of my CAST students. So past students, I sent this out to them, and I see that from their names that they have signed up, and I want to welcome them and thank them for being a part of this. I've asked them toward the end to tell us what this meant to us, and or to even write in the chat what it meant to them to take a CAST course, and how it impacted maybe their educational trajectory and career choices, and also how they found out about it, because many folks who are starting CAST want to know how to get into it. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, but I'm going to ask my students, because I know some of them might have to leave us early, to just put in the chat what it has meant for them. And we're going to ask our teaching assistant, Hannah Gilbert, to also share some information about the evaluations that we've had. But it is truly my honor and pleasure today to introduce the founding father of CAST. Victor is many things to many folks, and he's a rock star in a lot of our books. In the work he does. I have a feeling most of you on this call already know about Victor, so he needs no introduction. But Victor has trained thousands and thousands of child protection professionals from 50 states and dozens of other countries, in investigation, in prosecution, and also in prevention. He has earned the highest of honors from both APSAC and child welfare organizations. He's currently serving as the Director of Education and Training for Zero Abuse Project, which is a nonprofit located in St. Paul, and it really is devoted to education, training, and survivor support to eradicate child sexual abuse and remedy some of the past injuries. He is the past president of the American Academy on Violence and Abuse and the founder of the National Child Protection Training Center. Victor has been involved nationally in prosecutions, where I first saw him and became a follower, and where he first introduced me to his concept of, into the third generation we go and how can we prevent, and sort of inspired me to getting out of prosecution, but instead looking at what can we do upstream to prevent abuse. Victor's also been a major implementing forensic interviewing in almost 22 states, and he continues to work in doing that. In his background, he graduated magna cum laude from WSU, and he earned his Juris Doctorate from Hamline University. He also recently earned his MA in theology from Wartburg Seminary, and he has published countless articles and a book that I have used and brought to and actually gave to some of the bishops that I work for in the National Review Board, called On This Rock, which is a wonderful fundamental reading if you're working with faith leaders, and truly is something that we should all take a look at as child abuse professionals. But he's with us today to bring, hopefully, and inspire all of you to maybe reach out to your university as I once did and say, how can I, either as an academic or even as a community partner, bring this incredible program to universities and to students across disciplines? So without further ado, I turn this over to Victor. Thank you, Victor.
Great. Thank you, Stacie. It's good to be with you. And thanks, Janet and everybody at APSAC for hosting this Zoom session this afternoon. The plan is as follows. I'll chat a little bit with you about the history of CAST. Yogi Berra said history is important. If we don't know where we've been, it's hard to figure out where we're going. I'll then turn it over to my colleague at the Zero Abuse Project, Tyler Counsil, who is the director of our CAST program, and he'll share with you where we're currently at in the country and what resources Zero Abuse Project provides to sustain and grow the CAST programs. And then we're blessed to have not one, but two CAST professors with us. Stacie is one, and Dr. Betsy Gillay from the University of Illinois Springfield is also with us. And Betsy will chat about her work and the importance of simulation training as part of CAST. And Stacie and her students will share their experiences as well. And then we hope to have a meaningful time to field what questions you have and direct those to the appropriate party. For me, CAST began 30 years ago when I began my career as a child abuse prosecutor and child protection attorney in rural Minnesota. Just a few weeks into my job, I was asked to try a complex multi-day termination of parental rights case. And the most poignant moment came when I had a young social worker on the witness stand and a defense attorney grilled him about all the things that he did wrong. And one of the things he did wrong is he removed a baby from the home, which under Minnesota law, he lacked the authority to do. And as he was grilled during cross-examination, he became very emotional. He started to cry and he said, look, I went into the house, there's garbage everywhere and feces everywhere and a baby on the floor and the baby's not moving very well and the baby seems to be covered with maggots. I just didn't know what to do. I just scooped up the infant and rushed to the hospital. I didn't know what I was doing. If truth be told, nobody in that courtroom knew what we were doing, not me, the prosecutor, not the judge, not the defense attorney, not the social workers, the doctors, the psychologists, the victim advocates. For all of us, if we're really honest, who've been working in this field, it is primarily, if not exclusively, on-the-job training. So that stuck with me for a number of years. And then fast forward to early 2002, I was directing the National Center for Prosecution of Child Abuse. I went home for the holidays in Winona, Minnesota, and my wife and I had dinner with Jim Schmidt, who was a vice president for advancement at Winona State at that time, and his wife, Kim. And Kim shared with us that she was helping a doctor deliver a baby, and the mom was a survivor of sexual abuse, and she had flashbacks, triggers during the procedure, and it became very difficult to deliver the baby. And she said, gosh, I wish that sort of thing was covered in nursing school. And I said, I gotta be honest with you, I've never heard about that particular situation before, but let's just step back. The most basic things about child maltreatment are not covered in nursing programs or medical schools or law schools or psychology programs or social work programs or criminal justice programs or faith programs or fill in the blank. It is primarily, if not exclusively, on-the-job training. And my friend Jim pushed back on that and said, oh, come on, that couldn't be that bad, could it? But after an hour or so, I convinced him that is the lay of the land. And we, as a nation, have to stop turning out folks who know so little about child protection. So Jim said, well, what if we were your test university? What if we got some federal funding and we could develop this extraordinary initiative and help you disseminate it across the country? So the National District Attorneys Association said, sure, if you did that, we would collaborate with you. And back in an era where you could get congressional earmarks, that's exactly what Winona State did. And that began what at that time was the National Child Protection Training Center, focused on reforming undergraduate and graduate training. So what happened at Winona State that soon swept across the country? Well, we looked at 60 federally funded training programs. We said, what's being taught in the field that we really could teach better at the undergraduate and graduate level? And at the end of the day, we developed a 21 credit minor, which is interdisciplinary. So at Winona State, you could major in social work, criminal justice, nursing, psychology, education, any other discipline, and you minor in child advocacy studies or child protection. It's rooted in experiential training, something that Betsy will chat about later on. And then we began to spread the model across the country, and eventually it spread to 28 states. Mississippi is the state with the most CAST institutions, 28 or so, I believe, in counting. We developed then CAST programs for law schools, medical schools. We even have a CAST seminary program, and then began to enlist prestigious researchers to take a look at the program. Today, there are 6 peer-reviewed and published studies documenting the efficacy of the medical school version of CAST, and there are 2 peer-reviewed published studies documenting the efficacy of the undergraduate program. The most recent study done at the University of South Carolina Upstate found that CAST students were doing a whole lot better than child protection workers who'd been in the field for several years in assessing and identifying unique characteristics of a complex case of child maltreatment. And Dr. Ted Cross and his research team from the University of Illinois are doing a couple years worth of studies in Mississippi, the most robust CAST state. And all of that data is coming back positively, and I'm confident when they are done, we'll have several additional peer-reviewed studies documenting the efficacy of our work. Dr. Cindy Miller-Perrin and Dr. Robin Miller-Perrin are doing research on the CAST version for seminaries, and so hopefully that will be out in a couple years as well. So that's how CAST began, and there's nothing so compelling as an idea whose time has come, and so we just began to talk up a storm, to plant seeds, and then there were good people like Stacie and Betsy and others who said, yeah, the time has come to dramatically improve undergraduate and graduate training, and so it spread rapidly across the country. Zero Abuse Project nurses the program, but we're so proud that APSAC and AVA and National Children's Alliance and so many other national programs have also given a forum to CAST and promoted CAST, and it really is a national movement. And Bree will post one of our resources, a recent law review article that summarizes the history, summarizes the research, and carves out a game plan for fundamentally improving child protection. So that's a quick overview of about 20 years of history of CAST, and with that I will turn it over to my friend Tyler Counsil. Tyler has a background in CAST. He taught CAST in Indiana, and then he came to Zero Abuse Project to be our first director of CAST. His full-time job is to help sustain the CAST programs throughout the United States, to launch CAST in new programs throughout the United States, and he's going to share with you where we're at in terms of CAST and what resources Zero Abuse Project provides for those of you who may be interested in implementing a child advocacy studies program. Tyler?
Thank you, Victor. Yes, much like Victor's own story, my story began, in higher education in 2012. Just full disclosure, I'm a scientist. I'm a forensic scientist by trade. I've taught in criminal justice programs and developed forensic science programs, and I've even worked in a forensic biology unit processing child sex abuse evidence for the Indiana State Police. And so one of the things that I noted in terms of my personal story and why I got invested in CAST, it really just boiled down to a lack of preparation that I saw. I mean, myself as an educator, having adult students disclosing maltreatment during office hours, during my classes. Specifically, my wife is an elementary education teacher, and she came home crying one day. In the past year that she was teaching, she had witnessed student-on-student violence in the hallways and didn't know how to respond to it. In fact, she had actually seen an event where a student in their classroom was being abused by a teacher, and she had no idea what to do. She wasn't even sure really how to make a mandatory report or how to respond. And so we talked about it, and she ended up quitting her job, and we raised a beautiful family. We have 5 children now. But I looked for something in higher education to really, how can we fill that gap? I wasn't aware of child maltreatment. I wasn't aware how to make a report. My wife wasn't. And so that's how I came on board with CAST, teaching it to law enforcement majors, teaching it even to the forensic scientists so that they could be understanding of the corroborating evidence that's out there. And so my current role as director of CAST for the Zero Abuse Project is really sustaining the programs that are out there that have developed in 16 years and then helping new programs grow. And so currently, I'm proud to say that we have 84 programs across 28 states in the US. We also have some international programs, approximately 4 of those. We have 6 law schools that are on board, a couple of seminaries, and 2 medical schools, one in Mississippi and Ohio. We have 28 CAS programs currently in the state of Mississippi. They are number 1. In terms of our resources and outreach, one of the things that I think is so empowering, especially from my perspective, is that all of our resources from the Zero Abuse Project are at no cost. My help, my time and effort to help you deploy CAST, all of that comes at no financial obligation. We're just here to help you and to improve the lives of children ultimately. So we collaborate with faculty to explore where CAST could fit in their current programming. We'll work to create syllabi and help develop resources for them. We actually have an open education resource share drive that we share actively with our CAST faculty. We have a no-cost profile page where you at the national level through our website can showcase your program. And in fact, we're going to share that link there just as an example of that marketing. We also have a video library. We have publications, a publication library on our website that you can use if you'd like to make an e-text instead of use a textbook, or you'd like to use those video links as supplements to your coursework. We also have a faculty corner for news, and we communicate updates there and accolades for some of our CAST programs. And we also have a quarterly newsletter where we post updates as well. And then I don't want to forget, obviously with ABSAC and our collaboration there, we do have a collaboration with them for their course that they created with the New York Foundling, where I think it can be a great opportunity for CAST faculty to create an online series of modules for their CAST program. And then also through that collaboration, we have discounts for professional memberships to ABSAC. So with that, to talk a little bit more about CAST and what it really means to them from a faculty perspective, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Betsy Gillay, who's a clinical assistant professor at the University of Illinois Springfield and who also is our CAST coordinator. Betsy?
Thanks, Tyler. I have to first think back to something that Stacie's already said that I think many of you it'll resonate with a lot of you. If you know Victor, sometimes we measure the importance of our memories by the vividness of those recollections. And I was in a room at a conference in Alabama when Victor just, I think there was a hush in the room when he started talking about the goal of creating this new curriculum for what would likely be the front line, the next generation of workers who knock on doors and who are so ill prepared because their undergraduate and even graduate programs left them just needing so much information about at-risk children and families. And so that moment really has stuck in my head for all these years, and I won't tell you how much less gray hair I had at that time, and but I was much younger, and it's been as to steal another word that Stacie used, it's been my absolute greatest blessing to have learned that day what CAST could do, and to have had such an incredible mentor like Victor to get me and our program at a moment in time where we could begin bringing this content to our students. And as Tyler said, our students come from multiple disciplines, multiple departments, every single semester, and we've been teaching CAST since 2015. Our CAST program is online and on ground. Well, it was. Right now, it's pretty much just online. And we have the majority of our students from psychology and social work, followed by criminal justice, teacher ed, and a smattering of outliers like English and biology. All are welcome. Everyone can learn something, even if they're never going to take a job in child welfare. They will learn something about mandated reporting. They'll learn something if they're just going to be parents. And I don't mean just parents, but if they don't have a pathway to a career in child welfare. Victor mentioned our simulation connection to our CAST program. Our students spend considerable time not just in the classroom, but also having access to our residential simulation lab, which is on our campus. When I set foot the first time in the simulation lab that Victor had at Winona State, I knew the difference that would make for this next generation of child welfare workers. I knew that if they set foot in an environment that replicated the chaos often and the complexity of child maltreatment, that it could make a difference for them, build their confidence, and truly prepare them for how difficult these cases are. And I say that from a place of regret, because I was a child protection investigator for 9 months. That's as long as I had the confidence to do it. And I do look back and I know that I spent so many nights worried that I had left a child somewhere that I shouldn't have, or I took somebody's child into custody that I shouldn't have. And that is that's no way to live. Sleepless nights, fear, anxiety, and wondering about these children every single day. My training was abysmal. I had no training in my undergrad. I did not know what it meant to make a report. I didn't know what would happen next if I did. I had all those common fears that mandated reporters have. And then when I went to work for DCFS, I didn't know the procedures clearly enough, and I certainly didn't know what to expect when I went into people's homes. So the simulation component of CAST, it doesn't have to be an elaborate setting. You can create environments that are as close to the type of houses or spaces that people are going to encounter. What's really critical about that space is not so much what the building looks like, but what you're able to create inside that space. For instance, creating scenarios where you have to have difficult conversations, where you have to ask those questions that get at what is really happening in that family. So our CAST students spend a couple times in the semester first just getting acclimated to child maltreatment, understanding the history, and it's relatively, we're talking 1974, with CAPTA, when creating mandated reporting. So students often think 1974 is forever ago. Of course, I don't. I was, in high school. So, but it's a relatively new concept that we protect children. And so we talk to them a lot about the value in that and the roles that they are hoping to take on. Then once they've had some of that foundation, we take them into the house. And they stand outside first and they look at the house. Now our little house looks like it needs some TLC. It's had better days, but we want them to stand out front because we want them to deal with all of their assumptions and their bias about what they're looking at. And all of us do this. All of us have assumptions about people, about certain encounters that we have, and we bring those to our work. And one of the most valuable things about CAST is asking students to really just reflect on those. And there's no judgment, there's no intent, to shame people for those. It's to show how common it is. So they'll look at the house and they'll see the paint falling off and the broken window blinds, and they'll say, I don't think those people care. They don't care about, where they live, and they should fix that. And then they start to really get into it, and they create all kinds of stories about the people inside that are just, quite elaborate. And we stop them and say, all right, what if we told you that the landlord just won't fix a thing, and that they have asked repeatedly to have that trash removed out in front, or to please give them some better window blinds, or to fix the lock on the door. What if we told you that? And then they sort of, put their heads down and look at the ground and, feel a little bit like, that does make a difference. But we have to really address those attitudes and those belief systems. And because every case is different and every family has complex issues that they're dealing with, and you can't go in with already determined approach or outcomes in mind. And CAST does a remarkable job of correcting some of that thinking and building that confidence that our students need so much. So there's retention in the field. So we reduce the turnover in the field. That is critical. Some workers just start to get really good at about, a year and a half. And we know nationally that turnover occurs at about the 2-year mark. So that tells you about their confidence. They're not feeling like they can stay in this work. And that is hard on the children that they're working with. It's hard on the system. It's costly. So we're really encouraged by what we're learning about simulation, about evaluating the role of simulation training for frontline and for students. Because at the 18-month mark, we've learned, at least in Illinois where we're doing this, looking at some investigators who did not have simulation training compared to those that did, the pre-sim trained workers are twice as likely to leave at the 18-month mark than those who had simulation training. So what will it be like if we can add all of these CAST students to that pool and start looking at what is CAST doing in preparing all of these future frontline workers to stay longer, to feel better about the work they're doing, to have that confidence, and to not lose sleep at night. So CAST can easily be started as a certificate. It's electives often in most of our universities and our colleges, and often they fill the classes so easily that it isn't a hard sell to move to a minor. And that's exactly where it took us about 5 years to finally get to where we could go through that whole process, but we are launching our minor this semester. So I hope you have questions afterwards, and I will turn it back over to Stacie, who has also done a remarkable job of building a fabulous CAST program for her students.
Thank you, Betsy. And I dream about one day having a certificate program at Tulane. But my initial inspiration with doing CAST, I was reached out by some researchers I had been working with in developing no-hit zones and other projects. But Dr. Drury and Dr. Taylor and Dr. Thiel, who are leading researchers at Tulane University, had said, would you be interested in teaching a class with us? And at about the exact same time, I knew that Victor was going to be over in Mississippi. It wasn't a far drive. So I drove over to Jackson and I said, let me see what's going on here. And it just dawned on me that I could make the course that we were developing into a CAST course. And so Tulane had put together a program called 360, a multidisciplinary perspective. And I'm like, wow, this really fits with what we're talking about. And what they had said they wanted to do was have community partners and folks bringing it in and bring in different disciplines. And one of the fundamental pieces of CAST is about bringing in social workers sitting next to pre-med students. And so I had the opportunity, and with the way the course was developed is that we had equal amounts of neuroscience, psychology, social work, and public health all sitting there. And we've now expanded to even have an early childhood. I see that Louisa was one of our first early childhood students who was going to be a teacher who took the course. And to echo what what Betsy said, word of mouth sells this. When we first did it, we thought, okay, we might have 30 students. The university called us and said, would you expand that? Would y'all double? And we were like, we never thought we would fill 30 spots. We had 60. Before you know it, the first semester, I sort of said, oh, sure, bring them on. I had not graded papers before. I did not realize. But we went to 100. We didn't do that again, but it was fabulous. But we had 4 professors. We were equally sharing the load, and we even brought in guest speakers. And we did it as a multidisciplinary look. And it was so inspirational for me. One, Victor made it easy then. Tyler has made it even easier with Zero Abuses support. It was easy, it was fun, it was rewarding. And the students that reached out to me afterwards were so enthusiastic about how it made a difference in their life and that they were going to do things differently. I recently wrote a letter of recommendation for one of my second semester CAS students who's now going on, she's graduated from med school and wants to be a child abuse radiologist. And she says, I'll just never forget when you were talking about child physical abuse and how you could diagnose that. And that inspired her to want to be in that field. And every time I have a student that reaches out to me, whether it be a letter of recommendation or to intern, and that's another rewarding piece of this. I've had so many students take the class and then ask me, can they intern with me afterwards and work on projects? One of the students that just left us, Louisa, this summer, she worked on a project in developing a book for therapists doing CBTTF, cognitive behavioral trauma focused therapy, a whole workbook. And she helped work on that using her early childhood background. So it was just a fabulous experience all around. I truly enjoy CAST, teaching CAST. I enjoy the days. I will say one of the most devastating moments to me with COVID was when I realized we were going to go virtual. And I'll never forget the last class I was there with hand sanitizer and thinking we can do this in person, and we had to go virtual. And our students actually have told us now that they really look forward to it. It used to be at the end of class that I'll be packing up. At the end of our virtual classes, they would stay with us and we connected and we wound up doing more activities. We always, with our course, they visited the Children's Advocacy Centers. While we didn't have a house, they did get to visit the Children's Advocacy Center. They visited the coroner's office. They visited Dr. Jury's lab. They got to test cortisol levels. They heard about how she was testing to see about the length of telomeres and her research there. They saw the work of Dr. Kat Fial and looking at how improving neighborhoods really does improve the health overall. They got to go to the coroner's office. They went to community events every year. But after COVID hit, we couldn't have our community event. And we had an event where the students were collecting shoes and we were going to display the shoes of lives lost and having a ceremony with planting pinwheels and different childhood activities. And the students all chair the activities. And instead we went online and they all participated. They had their friends come and participate. And they seem to enjoy it, or at least that's what they tell me. And that's why I've asked them, and I don't know if I can call on anybody. I know that I have some folks out there and I'd like to see if you'd be willing to speak as former students. Cecilia, does that mean you're willing to speak since you went on camera?
Yes, I would love to. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. This is wonderful. So I am a student at Tulane. I'm a rising senior right now. And I took the class with Stacie my freshman year. It was in the spring, so I believe it was the second semester that they offered it. And this class, to this day, has been very influential for me. I'm a public health major, and I think as I've gone throughout my studies, there's been a lot of disjointedness, I think, in some of my studies, and in good ways and bad ways. You know, I'll have classes about social and behavioral health or environmental health or policy, and it's great to get a deep dive into those, but there aren't a lot of opportunities to really pull all those aspects together. And it was early in my college career, but it was during the ACEs course where I saw how just completely insane it was to me, for lack of a better word, that more of these principles about child maltreatment are not taught in public health classes. And I was also taking pre-med classes, and the whole concept of shifting from the focus on a population onto the focus of an individual child was so influential to my own career path. And I'm still kind of deciding where I want to go, but I know that I want to be a part of the upstream prevention of child abuse and neglect, because I have just loved learning about how influential it is to start from day one, about how you speak around an infant, how the environment is, how this affects their brain structure, how it affects their future disease burden. And that was just mind-boggling to me, that, you know, a child in a home that was maltreated could have a different brain structure and shorter telomeres. And that was just something that, like, to this day is mind-boggling to me. And I learned about this course because my dad is a psychiatrist, and he works with Dr. Drury. And so she had told me about this class, and I was like, oh my gosh, that sounds fascinating. So I signed up, but it was very much by a word of mouth. Otherwise, I don't know if I would have known about it. And I do try to tell a lot of friends, and I have occasional encounters with friends where they said, oh, what was that class that you took freshman year that you always talked about? What was that? Like, can I take that? How do I sign up for that? But I think it is such an important part of the educational experience, because also we did darkness to light training, and we visited the Children's Advocacy Center and saw just the impact of trauma-informed care, and how to intervene, how to report things, how law affects it. And I won't go on and on, but it was really influential class, and I'm very grateful for Stacie. And now I'm interning with her, which is a huge pleasure for me. So I just wanted to share a little bit about my experience, but I hope that encourages you all to consider these classes, because I would love to see more of them for sure.
Well, Celia, I think that would be the best infomercial we could ever have for CAP. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
But it is truly like the students, when they come to me, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the most rewarding thing in the world. And this is Victor's brainchild. And I am just so blessed that he had this idea, and I got to experience what it's like to be a teacher and inspire other folks to help in this field. So thank you for being in the class and for you guys signing up today. So I'd like to open it up to others. Victor?
I think if folks have questions, now's the time to field them. Either type them into the chat box, or just raise your hand and come off mute. Bree will help you. And we have a wide variety of folks here that can answer just about anything.
Also, Bree shared an article about our two-lane class, if you guys are interested. And thank you, Bree, for doing that. And we have one of our teaching assistants that could also share some of the experiences of past students. But if you have questions, please do ask.
You want me to share?
Sure, go ahead. I know you prepared something, so do it. Yes, thank you.
I can't share yet, but I was a teaching assistant for the class and was around from the beginning at Tulane. So at the beginning, I was coordinating the community events, and then last year I was actually a real teaching assistant and working with a small group every week. I can truly tell you that I get emails constantly just about different cases that are going on currently. And it's really fun to just continue that dialogue. And this has been a year or two later, and they're still looking at articles and still really engaging in that conversation. we do evaluations every year, and we could send countless, and I think that students have already shared, but one that I will tell you is one it's an amazing class. It opens your eyes to a lot of myths that you have believed before. It's a perfect blend of science and fun. So truly, students aren't really looking at this as another academic class that can be boring. This is truly so eye-opening. And we're sort of hopefully adapting this idea to the master's level as well with a small group of scholars and really bringing it together. So I wish I could have taken it as undergrad, but it's truly probably my favorite thing to do as well.
Thank you. I see a question in the chat about, can this be transitioned to people currently in the field? And I know that personally I've taken this to New Orleans Police Department, and I'm sure Victor or Tyler could talk about that.
Yeah, I can start, but yeah, it can, and some CAST programs have online versions, and they have graduate programs or certificate programs offered for folks in the field. And our Zero Abuse project, we collaborate with a lot of CAST programs. Betsy's is one where they have a great simulation lab, and then we can work with them to do experiential training for MDTs in the field. That was part of the original vision, that we would dramatically improve undergraduate, graduate training, and then we would have CAST programs and CAST simulation laboratories all over the country that could also then turn around and provide simulation training for professionals in the field, which research and common sense says is the sort of training that makes the biggest difference. You know, one of the national challenges of simulation training is there just drops in the bucket, 20 to 40 people at a time. So how do you do that at a national level? Well, you do it through CAST programs in every state in the country, and many of them having simulation labs, and then you do train the trainer projects where you develop experiential courses and help implement them at these CAST programs, and then all of a sudden the entire country is being lifted up quite dramatically. Tyler, Betsy, want to add to that?
I just wanted to say we were lucky last summer to launch a training with 5 of our children's advocacy centers in the state, brought them together, and one of the, I think, unexpected outcomes, putting them through a scenario, putting them in the house, they're working together as a team, the full team had to come to the training, was how surprising to find that many of them did not know their own CAC's protocol. Mm-hmm. And they were butting heads, and they were completely at these gaps in understanding who was supposed to do what and in what order. And, you know, the prosecutors were talking to the law enforcement, and child protection was saying, yes, but I got to do this. And I thought, see, we've, as a movement, CACs, and I'm a former CAC director, CACs have been around for, 30 years, and we're still having these tug of wars about who needs to do what in relationship to a protocol that guides practice. So simulation will give you that opportunity to find that out, mm-hmm. that you might not have realized that there were, misunderstandings about how the team still functions as a team. And I took, that was my takeaway from that training. Like, wow, more MDT training, more simulation, more joint investigation work is critical, because if anybody along the way doesn't do what they're supposed to do, we have bad outcomes for kids. And so it's really critical that we really do work together seamlessly and with a full understanding and appreciation of what the systems response is. And that's the name of one of our classes too, systems response.
Thanks so much to everyone. We've got another question, and Betsy, I know you answered this in the chat. Stacie, if you have sort of a different situation within your program, the question was, can you describe more of what your simulation looks like now being conducted online instead of in the home? So any remote learning tips and tricks?
Tyler, do you want to field that one?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what we're currently working on is some training and some modules where we're going to have, for example, a virtual house. And I know that Betsy has worked on something similarly, and many of our CAS programs are working on this, where we have a virtual house where in 360 degrees, you can essentially walk through this home, and you can look at it in different types of context, right? If you've got maybe the social worker student, they're looking at it from a risk and protective factor and trying to see, right, what the final disposition is of the child or children in this home. You know, from the law enforcement perspective, which is where I resonate, we're looking at corroborating evidence. We're looking at direct physical evidence that could be indicative of a crime, and whether or not we want to collect that and bring it to the forensic science lab. There's also been a lot of great stuff going on in terms of using Zoom as a platform for mock interviews, for example, with forensic interviewing, and then also using it for moot court or mock court as well. So there's a lot of innovation there. I mean, I'd be happy to talk with anybody about bringing on these kinds of virtual modules as time permits.
Great. And we have another question that came in privately. How do we get more information if we want to bring CAS to our community? What's the first step?
Well, we just shared the website link, and my actual email is Tyler, Tyler, at zeroabuseproject.org. Use our website. There's a great brochure on there that kind of gives you the grounding as to what CAST is. So in terms of CAST, as Betsy had already alluded, really it can be anything that you want it to be. It can be a 3-course certificate. It can be a minor. It can even be a major. My CAST course started in my victimology class. I'll be honest with you, the budget in Indiana for my criminal justice program was rather conservative. And so I was able to inject CAST into my current programming and put it in there. And I mean, like you've heard today in terms of success stories, it went from about 15, 20 students to over 30 to, do we need a second section, and how many seats can we fill into the room, right? It's compelling. The experiential learning is great. I mean, you're learning about the realities of the field, and you're able to learn in a format where a child's life isn't at risk, where we're not learning through teachable moments at the risk to that individual or to, say, a non-offending caregiver. And then it also really just helps dispel some of the myths. As a forensic scientist, I can tell you the Csi effect is real. A lot of our students see what they think is the front lines at 8 p.m. on, right, a given network, and it's just not the case. It's not the reality of it. I don't have a gun. I'm not Horatio sliding across the front of a vehicle, right? I'm literally in scrubs all day processing evidence. And in fact, most of my time is in front of a computer. And I think we need that kind of myth busting through experiential simulations where they're learning what the realities are so that they can decide if this is the best path for them in being successful in their professional lives. So yeah, I would recommend go to the website, contact us, and we'll definitely explore what a CAS launch might look like.
Another question I think I could help answer. We have a lot of folks asking about forensic interviewing through Zoom. I do want to let folks know that APSAC's forensic interviewing course has been approved by NCA to go virtual, and I have participated in the finding in the find curriculum, and they're doing that, and it's working really well because you go into small groups and you get a recording of it and you get feedback from the professor. So that will be coming out soon. If you check back with us in about a week, APSAC should have online that you can sign up for the APSAC training virtually, and it's going to be on a Friday, Monday in October. We also want to let everyone know about another opportunity for additional training through the National Initiative to End Corporal Punishment, which was one of Victor's ideas, and that's going to be on, save the date, October 15th. And then the other piece, I'm going to ask Bree to put the registration. I want to remind everyone, I know Janet talked about it earlier, is that we do have our virtual colloquium this year. Unfortunately, it was going to be in New Orleans. You're all going to be with me, but not this year. We're going to be doing it online, and we'll have a lot of folks doing advances around forensic interviewing. So we hope to see you then. But does someone else want to also talk about the how it's going with doing mock interviews through Zoom?
Yeah, our forensic interviewing program Child First was also approved by NCA, and so we've done a number of virtual trainings, and it's almost identical to what we would do in person, except you're a student, you're interviewing an actor via Zoom, and you can replicate your room in the actor's room with flip charts or whatever tools you're using. So you got to think in advance. You got to put more effort into it. And ironically, what we're doing via Zoom has been happening at some level at CSEs across the country, when during the pandemic they sometimes have had to interview children not in the same room. So it can be done. It just takes a little more effort and a little more thought. Rita Farrell, who oversees our forensic interview training programs, she's a good a resource if you wanted to learn more about what the potentials there could be.
Thank you, Bree, for putting in the chat how to sign up for all this great training. Fabulous. Do we have any other questions out here?
I haven't gotten, well, I did get one question in private message, and it was just if people are talking to their programs about CAST and want to give the people at their program a name, should Tyler be that name?
Yes.
Okay. Perfect.
Yes.
Charged.
All right, and we always send out a resource list following the Zoom chat, usually a day or two after. So we'll include the email and all these links for everyone.
And I do want to, again, plug that what Victor, Betsy, and Tyler have done, they make it very easy. They have, they have syllabi, they have test questions. We all tend to share. Going virtual, we had to do essays, and we were like, write a letter to the editor of how you would explain ACEs, how you would explain the impact. And it was amazing to see. Write a sample grant to a local school program about why it's important to train teachers about ACEs and how to talk to kids about trauma. Great ways to share. It doesn't have to, we have to recreate the wheel. There's a lot of folks out there willing to share to make this easy for you and how to approach your university. I will say at Tulane, we got really great press, and that was another big selling, that they continue to support it. So you can use that from other universities to help sell it in your own, even as a partner, because I was outsider going into Tulane and they embraced it. So.
If I could add to that, people often ask me, how do I sell CAST? How do I get my institution to implement it? And it's going to be different. You know the lay of the land in your institution better than anyone. So what arguments appeal to them? But you can certainly say this is where the country is going. I was at a university, not to be named, that was resistive to CAST, and there was a professor who said, well, what research do you have to support CAST? And of course today we've got 8 studies. Back then I think we had 2. And he said, well, how can I change the whole curriculum based on 2 studies? And I said, well, let me ask you a question. What research do you have to support what you're currently doing? And of course he didn't have any. In fact, it's just the opposite. 40 years of research says that we're turning out folks who are poorly trained, and as a result they make egregious errors. We did a national study with Winona State when the whole movement began, and they queried something like 2,200 universities in the country, looked through all their course catalogs and all your major disciplines, and only 29% had any training on child protection. And of course those that did, it was an hour here or there. In fact, there are other studies saying at best you get 2 to 4 hours of training on child abuse at the undergraduate level. And that's just the reality. In my home state of Minnesota, we've got more rigorous training to cut hair than we do to work in the field of child protection. It's like 1,600 hours of training to cut someone's hair, but it's a couple weeks of training once you graduate college to work in child protection, and of course virtually nothing then to work in criminal justice or as a prosecutor or a judge, right? It is all on the job training, and we pay for it egregiously, and we're always playing catch up. So we got to we got to get on board the train. We got to move the nation forward. And so sometimes I say to universities, A, it's where the country is going. So do you want to be on the front end of the movement, or do you want to be on the back end of the movement? Two, I think it's really important to get your local MDTs to push for CAS, because they are your best selling points. Get those folks to go to professors and deans and college presidents saying, I didn't know what I was doing when I graduated. I had to play catch up. We need to go in this direction. That can be really powerful. And then don't underestimate heart. There are many people who've implemented CAS just because they felt it deeply in their heart. Yeah, I do want to protect children. I do want to improve the quality of child protection. And a lot of people just because of heart can move forward. Now, sometimes you've got institutions where it is all about money, and then I do think you can make the case that CAST is a good generator of revenue. At Winona State, CAST took off and went from a few students to a few hundred overnight, and became a generator of revenue. And I think that was true at a number of other institutions as well.
And to that end, I just want to, to support Victor's statement. I mean, we work with you based on where you're at and what your academic needs are to kind of craft those responses. If you're talking to your dean, or if you're talking to your vice president, right, or your provost. I mean, I could sit here and talk to you for hours about some of the research. We're not moving the needle in higher ed. In fact, there were three studies I looked at just this week that looked at textbooks alone, right? Because textbooks nowadays, they sell you on all of their resources and their materials. They give you test banks. Well, several of the child maltreatment-based textbooks we're finding have erroneous, outdated information. They're omitting information. I just looked this week too in terms of professional acumen. Law enforcement, on average, 6 hours of exposure to child maltreatment education. I can tell you, I won't name the state, but their mandated reporting required certification content was 40 minutes of YouTube videos, and then you just screen capped and printed out the certificate of completion, and suddenly you're good at creating a mandated report. In fact, for educators, the state education website that I looked at had another video link, except it went to a 404 error. So there's just a lot of situations where we are chronically, depending on what field you're in, from law enforcement to education to public administration, where we're dropping the ball. And that's where CAST is really at the point where there's nothing else like it, especially from the problem-based learning and the experiential learning simulations. And at this point, we've got to do something to change course and to end child abuse and neglect. And so CAST is a great way to do that. And we'd be happy to work with you to create those narratives.
We are past time, and I want to thank folks for staying on. And Bree, thank you so much for putting all these great resources. I hope everyone is checking the chat box. We have our advisor article coming out, which is highlighting these forensic interview models that we've discussed and how you could sign up for the colloquium. And if anything else anyone wants to share, please give it to Bree. And this will be recorded. Any last words, Victor?
My thanks to everybody for being here. History has changed, not at the national level, but at the local level. Where did the civil rights movement begin? It's a woman in Montgomery who said, I'm not going to give up my seat today. And then there was a preacher in town who said, that's right. And we start a boycott, and then it spreads across the country. CAS began at a little university in southeastern Minnesota. Now it's spread to 28 states. So don't underestimate the power of you, each of you. One person, and you get a couple of other folks on board. You can implement CAST. You can be a part of changing the country long into the future. So I have great respect for frontline professionals, and I very much believe in the power of one person with a good heart doing great things. So thanks for being here today, and I can't wait to see what you do in your communities. I know it's going to be splendid.
We can stay and answer questions, but thank you all for being here. And there's Janet back with us. Did you have any last words, Janet? I didn't mean to.
I just again want to encourage folks who are not yet a member of APSAC to consider joining us. And if remind folks that if COVID has hurt your budget, we are ready and able to help you keep your membership or anything else you need to take advantage of the resources we've got to offer. So, and thank you, and watch our website for upcoming additional Zoom chats and our APSAC Foundling webinar series. We're scheduled through the fall, so stay in touch.